And thank you for continuing to watch the show. I see a lot of feedback coming through via 22422 as well as on Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, at Zinzi_K, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Daybreak. We'll be sampling some of them shortly. But before we do that, just as we conclude on the question of land, when you read the Ndungu report, as I said, several politicians and powerful people that worked under KANU would appear to have benefited from large allocations. I don't know if you are. I read the report, but I will not say what I found. But we learn from the report that there are illegal presidential allocations, the illegal allocation of state corporations' land that belonged to the public, what you may call public purposes, as well as allocation of riparian reserves and sites. Something else that I found is that land was allocated for political patronage. The best example is Koigi Wamora, who says that he had been offered land, but when he changed tune, that land was taken away. The report talks of undocumented presidential allocations, illegal allocation by the commissioner of lands who would claim to have been cleared by the president, and there were forged letters allocated government land, and there were illegal transfers of undeveloped leasehold land. It was taken away from people who would appear against the system. This was between 1988 and 2002. So when you look at all this, why was it so difficult to stop the illegal allocation of land? And you know that it is one of the issues on historical injustices. Are we where we are because of the ills that happened during that regime?
Well, I think how much we must come to terms as a nation. How much do you want to lord over Moi?
Yes, I didn't mention him. I'm saying during his regime.
No, I think this is a conversation. Because this conversation is like we want to load our current problems, all of them, onto him. And I don't think that would be doing justice. He had his infractions. His government may have had infractions, some of which are highlighted in the TJRC report. But remember, the TJRC report goes even beyond the Moi era. It covers way beyond that.
Right.
So I think Moi has been out of government for 18 years, right? When he handed over peacefully to Kibaki. In 2003, and now we are in 2020. We have had a regime of Kibaki 10 years, and now we have a regime of Uhuru. He's into his last phase of his leadership. So I think it would do us a lot of good as a nation. I'm not saying that we should not resolve the issues under the TJRC report. In fact, that report is lying before Parliament for resolution. All right, but is it lying before a parliament that is a Moi parliament? It's not. It's lying before a parliament that is dominated by the Jubilee government in numbers. So let us be realistic here in terms of how much do you want to load onto Moi about these things. As far as I'm concerned, there are issues that we must address. And the sooner we say that let us address them, I'm not saying we should not talk about Moi and his era, but I think it is important that we now say, can we continue blaming our inability to alter certain aspects on his regime?
Gentlemen, from this conversation we're having, even from diving from the conversation of gifts and his generosity, you've explained to us and you've taken through the nation how certain parcels of land were given to Kenyans then who, had nothing, given we were coming from a cold and a colonization era then, where large resources were taken. But where was the role of women in Moi's cabinet? For a man who empowered the girl child in terms of education. He got that right, fantastic, but where was the role of women in Moi's cabinet?
Remember, to be a minister at that time, you had to be a member of parliament. So we can ask, what was the role of Kenyans in not electing enough women to be ministers? Remember, Moi appointed Mheshimiwa Nyiva Mwendwa as the first cabinet minister who happens to be of the other gender.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is that increasingly you could find in a parliament of, let's say, 158 members of parliament, there may be one or two women, or even none. And of course there was the slot of nomination. But Moi empowered women in different ways and different positions.
How?
Because
Apart from education?
Education and also positions of decision making, both in government and in other government affiliated organizations, such as the parastatals. And that was good enough at the time. The space that we've created now through this new constitution is now deliberate to ensure that women have a role to play directly in decision making. But you see, his hands were tied. He could not have so many women appointed ministers when they were not in parliament.
But I can help you
yes.
here. You must remember that it is Moi who appointed the first head of public service.
Sally Kosgei.
Yeah.
Sally Kosgei.
Yeah.
A very efficient lady. She became the first woman head of the public service. That was not a small thing.
Sure.
He had Margaret Gidinji as a PS.
Yeah.
He had Mrs. Masiga as a PS.
Yeah.
There were judges sitting on the bench. Very many female judges sitting on the bench during Moi's tenure. So
could more have been done?
Yes, of course, more could have been done, but he did quite a lot. And remember, he was a strong advocate of the girl child.
Yes.
When you look at his contribution to what should have happened for the girls in terms of schooling and so forth, it is very significant. And even Moi was a very strong proponent against aspects like FGM. So these are factors that sometimes underrated. But remember, when everybody thought the job of the head of the public service is a male space, he gave it to a lady, and she did not fail.
All right, Isaac Ruto, as we exit this area.
Yes, I would like you to take you back to when Moi took over. Are you aware that when Moi became president, women, even who were teachers, had no house allowance? That they were earning less than men? Are you aware? Are you aware there were hardly 10 or 20 schools for women in this republic? He went out of his way to do a serious campaign to first take the girl child to school, give them equal opportunity even in the employment sector.
Right.
And then these young women eventually now rising to positions now is a product of what Moi did that time. I remember in the whole of Kericho and the Bomet, we had only one girls' school called Kipsigis Girls. He had to start so many others, including starting from the scratch and building it and doing serious fundraising to educate the girl child.
You had to go back. Successors taken then from that?
Now, even for you now to get lawyers, Moi had to start schools, and that child had to grow.
Right.
For that child to now become a minister now, had to learn in schools. You wouldn't just go and appoint women because they are women. They are never gone to school. But even right now as we talk, we are not aware of what happened in the 70s and even in the 80s. When we were in a class of 40, there were only probably 7 girls. And probably they were the last. They were very shy. They were all walikuwa nafunga macho wakiongea lakini wakanatesa. That whole culture had to change and somebody had to start it, and Moi did just that out of his way, but we are not according him that particular investment in girls.
Do you think
we want to say how many did you?
Do you think his successors have also done the same thing in sort of empowering women in their own capacities? The same way for the president at that time, he saw education was the problem. Empowered the girl child. Then his successors, what have they done?
His successors, I wouldn't want to start speaking for Kibaki or Uhuru Kenyatta. We can all see for ourselves. But the most important thing was to get the girls to be able to compete with the men. In fact, right now, in some regions like Central Province, you now have to start talking about the boy child. And we can no longer be even talking about the girl child in Central Province. Where are the boys? They are back. They have receded to drugs and the pombe. and all those other illicit activities. So, but the point here is the girls are now at par with the men in terms of opportunities. Now the rest belongs to us.
That's
it can't belong to
because many say that yes, they are almost at par in as far as education is concerned. When you hear results of KCSE or KCP being read out, they are almost at par in terms of enrollment. But when it comes to performance, the boys are still ahead. When it comes to jobs, if you go to the counties, including your own, I'm sure you'll find more men than women. So it's still a struggle. It continues. And a lady texted me on Saturday, says that before Moi became president, they didn't have identity cards. And he's the one that introduced that in 1981 before then they were known. And I think
even voting, they could hardly vote.
Oh, really?
Yes, but we cannot recall that. I mean, your generation cannot recall. We will forgive you because you have no idea what was happening before Moi came onto the scene.
Okay. Of course, on your screen you'll see images of Kenyans trooping to Parliament to be in a position to view the body of the late President Daniel Moi that continues to lie in state. This is the final day. It concludes at 5 p.m. And after that, the body will be taken back to Leaf in home for another procession tomorrow, but this time to the Nyayo National Stadium, where the memorial service will be held. And after that, it goes back to Leaf in home, and it to be moved on Wednesday morning to Kabrak home for the final rituals or rites and interment at the former president's home. I want us now to focus on the transition as you conclude this conversation, the transition from President Moi to President Moi. That was in 2002. But first, listen to the former, what is it?
President Moi to?
Moi, yeah, that's his name, isn't it? Let's listen to the former Attorney General Amos Wako, who spoke about many things that happened those days while he was in government.
President Daniel Moi was one of a kind. He was fatherly. As a lawyer, I can say he was a person who believed very much in the rule of law, who wanted everything he does to be within the confines of the law. And therefore, he really valued the legal advice you would give him on any issue. If it was an issue of changing the political system from one party to multi-party, I can tell you he had already confided in me more than 4 months before he announced it, that that's the way he was going and that I should prepare the necessary legal instruments. Yeah. So although people were talking the way they were talking, I knew the direction that my president wanted to go, and I was ready for it.
All right, so that's the former Attorney General. He says that even before the repeal of Section 2A, he knew it, and he prepared the appropriate legal instruments, and it almost crushed the party, but he was able to, once again, even when you listen to him, he's appealing to the masses there, please walk with me. Today, if you try such a thing, take a reference of the ruling party, if you try such a thing, there's a lot of opposition coming from different parts. How did all of you, some of you holding different opinions in as far as repealing of Section 2A and on how the future of the Kanu party, how did all of you all of a sudden follow the president? What are the fears or the opportunities or the respect, maybe?
I don't think it was really fears. They were realities of the time. And there is one thing which Moi keeps you find in his speeches all along about love, peace, and unity. He kept talking about the cohesiveness of the Kenyan society. He lived in days when there were serious fears about disintegration of a country. Remember, Kenyatta, the first president, lived through a time when Northeastern province simply wanted to secede to join Somalia. Remember, most parts of the first president's time, Luo Nyanza, if they had an option, could easily have seceded. They stayed seriously in opposition. And it was, Moi was living through a period, he was trying to integrate every part of this country into the mainstream and to understand themselves purely as Kenyans. So it is important that we need to look at even his fears as the multipartism came in. There was that latent fear that probably some sections, if they now fail to get the presidency, are they going to rebel? Those were the serious questions that were facing him. But at that time, he realized that time had come for him to open up the political space. At the same time, watch out to ensure that the republic remains one.
Honorable Kipruto, with all this noise, with all these differing opinions that were coming out at that time, how did Moi maintain to keep a united country given his dictatorship style of leadership? If
there was a good student of history, they would give Moi a certain position as a manager of transition. As Mheshimiwa Sekruta has said, Moi took over the leadership of this country from a society that was fractured. The first president was sort of lucky in a way because there was still abundant resources, named land, and therefore people were more engaged in trying to get a parcel of land to settle. But as President Moi took over from Kenyatta, the nation was fractured, but he managed to oversee that transition from Kenyatta, who was all-powerful, to himself, who had strictly some heavy Christian values. And after the first 10 years, apart from 82 coup, which he was also able to manage the transition very well, there was the transition from the bipolar system to almost a unipolar system now, where the America is calling the shots all over the world. And that is why there was diminished resources to the state and also to other institutions of government. And he was able to manage that. And that was when there was agitation for multipartyism. And remember, 89 and 91, when we removed Section 2A, is just 2 years. And that therefore means that transition was occasioned by the fact that the Western world ceased to support us as a nation.
Right.
And remember, even after that election, the election of 92, almost 66% of Kenyans voted against Moi. But he managed to retain power because the constitution at that time was just a simple majority. And the opposition were initially united, and later on when they fractured their unity, the Moi was able to steer the country for another 5 years.
Okay. And Honorable Mudavadi, fast forward to the 2002, just after the merge of KANU and NDP, and then the president says that he has chosen Uhuru Kenyatta to be the flag bearer of the ruling party then. And then there was a fallout, and you are left now sort of a cold KANU. How was it handling government affairs at that time when he lost so many cabinet ministers and influential ones per se, while also running a campaign for Uhuru Kenyatta?
Well, it was a difficult time, to be honest, because a lot of people in KANU at that time, and there was quite an array of people who had leadership qualities and who had ambitions to succeed President Moi. So the fact that at that time KANU did not go through a free and fair process of nomination clearly destabilized the fabric of the party. I can speak to this candidly because that is a reality that we cannot run away from. So during the last few months or towards the end of the 2002 election, it was clearly a difficult time because the government clearly knew that Moi's term was coming to an end. Constitutionally, he just had a few months to go, and you'd have to hand over power to another individual. Now, normally when you're in a transition and you're at that level, you are likely to expect that people in government are going to start looking ahead, trying to figure out what should they do, how should they behave, bearing in mind that there's going to be a new regime or a new leadership in the country. So it was a difficult moment. When the elections came and Kibaki took over, I think the most significant thing is that in spite of the fact that President Moi had Uhuru as the preferred candidate. But when the elections were conducted and the Kenyan people
Voters had it otherwise.
Had it otherwise, and
Right.
they voted for Kibaki. We must never, ever underrate the fact that Moi still went to Uhuru Park and handed over the instruments of power.
But do you think had he handled the transition differently, it would have changed the fortunes for the ruling party then?
Well,
Or Kenyans are done with Kanu?
this is now speculative. You know, it becomes speculation. You don't know because we don't know what would have been an outcome of a free and fair nomination. So we can only speculate.
Okay.
And really, I cannot imagine that I want to go back there.
Right.
Yeah.
Onaburuto, if there's something that history will applaud the late president for, is exactly that aspect. The fact that he overstayed his stay, yes, as the president, when came to time to hand over power, he did it peacefully. He did not try to come back. He did not try to make sure that his influence within the country is still felt. He went home and he retired.
Yes.
Would you not also, would you give him credit for that? Do you agree
It's a
with
serious,
history?
it's a very important accolade for him. Because even for the fact that right now we are giving him a lot of state respect is because he handed over power peacefully. Secondly, he actually followed the law. Even then, even when you are saying he overstayed, he was still within the law throughout. There was no law asking him to leave, and he was not defeated in any election. But he simply steered the country in that direction. And there is one thing that will forever be grateful to this, because the fact that he was able to go to Uhuru Park, hand over to President Moi Kibaki,
And not try to come back.
and that was not his choice.
Right.
And peacefully went home and stayed in Kabarak. It created a culture in which we are forever grateful to. We'll be changing our presidents peacefully, continuously, and we'll honor them. And that is a mark for Africa, for us Kenyans in Africa, that we can actually honor all our former presidents and therefore retain a unified country. If we want to disrespect that, we would create another problem for ages to come in terms of getting order and having people to respect their own institutions. We must admit mistakes that happen in all the regimes. There will be mistakes, but we cannot go on doing witch hunting on former presidents. We would like to see President Kibaki stay in peace. We want to see Uhuru Kenyatta retire, stay in peace. The next president the same, and then we will be admitted in the Committee of Nations as honest.
All right, I want us to wind up this conversation, and as we do so, I don't know, Kipruto Kirwa, what are your plans? So we have the memorial service tomorrow, then the funeral service and final interment on Wednesday. Yeah. What are your plans as we wind up?
Well, my plans is to give a deserving send-off to the president, President Moi, having mentored many Kenyans and have been a role model to millions of people here in Kenya and the rest of Africa. So those are my plans, to play my role as a good citizen, attend the funeral, and also wish the family well and strength as they overcome this particular grieving moment.
And former Vice President, your final thoughts on your boss?
Well, I hope you'll give me a little more time.
That's okay.
but anyway,
your rank allows.
But let me just also flip to the other side of Moi. You know, Moi was also a humorous individual, but he would convey his message sometimes to mean a lot. For instance, there are two phrases that you may have come across, or people are likely to come across. I do make reference to one of them in my book, Rising Above the Storms of Passion. One of the things that Moi would say when he wanted to tell you that you're being overambitious, he would tell you that even the most agile bull cannot serve, the most agile bull cannot service 50 heifers at the same time. All right? That kama wewe ni ndume wa aina gani? Hauwezi ati
Okay, we get it.
You get the point. Now, the other one, which again is very telling. Remember, Moi said that you can buy a golden bed, and this is in his book of sayings. You can, it is available somewhere. His famous quotes: "You can buy a golden bed, but you cannot buy golden sleep."
But you cannot buy a golden
sleep. You may buy a golden bed, but you cannot buy golden sleep. Now, that again tells you that those of you who believe that money is everything, think twice.
Right.
It may not necessarily be so. So I conclude by saying that when people were speaking to these things and they were chanting 18 years ago, yote yawezekana bila Moi, we now must reflect and ask ourselves, it is now 18 years later. What did we mean? Did we mean that democracy will be consolidated without Moi? Did it mean that corruption will now be fought without Moi? Did it mean that now the TJRC report will be implemented without Moi? Did it mean that leadership and governance would improve without Moi? What did we mean? What did Kenyans mean when they were chanting yote yawezekana bila Moi? I leave that for people to reflect on.
Honorable Ruto?
Yes, I think it's time now for us to see that actually Moi so far, very far like a giraffe, like Jaramogi said. When he took over power, he said anafuata nyayo za Kenyatta. And that meant he respected Kenyatta. And if you wanted to annoy Moi, say anything bad about the first president of the republic. Akafuata hiyo nyayo. Kibaki akaja, akafuata hiyo nyayo. He respected Moi, and Moi stayed in peace. And I think Kenyatta also now is respecting Kibaki. Wote wanafuata nyayo. Na yeye anafuata nyayo sahi, amesalimiana na rafiki yake Raila Odinga, which means nyayo inaendelea. Maneno kama hiyo, keep on like that. So as we say bye to Moi, I think we are saying kila mtu afuate nyayo. Let's create a culture of having peace and the two contestants not creating tension in the republic.
Okay, you haven't told me how you will be tomorrow and the day after.
Naturally, I'll attend the tomorrow's service.
Okay.
And I'll also attend the service at
Kabrak.
At Kabrak.
On Wednesday?
Same
yes.
to you.
Yeah, in fact, I will pass through Parliament now to pay my last respects, and I will also be there tomorrow.
All right.
And also on Wednesday at Kabrak.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. That's Honorable Isaac Ruto, alongside Honorable Musalia Mudavadi and Honorable Kipruto Arab Kira. Thank you so much, gentlemen. All of them served under Moi's cabinet in one way or another.
And we want to take a look at some of the feedback you've been sharing with us before I introduce the next segment. If you can have those on the screen. Engineer Lazaro, again, you say, Moi foreign policy was firm. We didn't experience any foreign incursion under his rule. The foreign incursion, like the one at Migingo Island, was unheard of. All
right, still on Twitter. Vickery, you say President Moi achieved what he could under every difficult circumstances. I dare say that the constitution then was in itself impartial, thus the dictatorial tendencies associated with Moi's regime. To err is only human.
Okay, this is John. You're saying that at one time, Moi admitted being the bus driver, which was being looted at the back by leaders without his prior knowledge. Let all learn from Moi, emulate the good and condemn